if he would. It depends on where he would end up. Los Angeles is. I don't know that he would leave LA, but I don't know what'll happen there. So all of a sudden, if Jansen leaves, then people are going to be all over Blake Trinan, and it just causes all those ripple effects. But in September, I want people really focusing on who's getting the highest leverage moment, and I want them focusing on who the manager really prefers in those roles as long as they're going to be back there next year.
It's funny with the Dodgers and Kenley Jansen. I feel like the Dodgers are an organization to have a complete committee, like to do the Rays. Except, I think that Kenley Jansen is the guy that they say, you know what, he's good enough. We're just going to throw him out there in the ninth. But I bet you dollars to donuts that in the playoffs, they scrap that. They use whoever they want in there. Kenley Jansen will be put in the seventh, the eighth, or whenever. I think they totally scrapped that model. I think just for the regular season, they say, listen, he's the closer. We're going to win. We're going to make the playoffs anyways. He's certainly not the cause of us missing the playoffs or winning or not winning the division, so you're going to keep the traditional role. And by the way, I think that, for next year, you should probably, you and others who do the closer charts, should really consider having not just a line for who's the closer, the setup man, but organizational philosophy, organizational and managerial philosophy. Is this a team that will do committee? Is this a team that will hey, I'm gonna like you said with the Yankees, it's a streamline. I want this guy in the seventh, this guy in the eighth. It's important to know what the team philosophy is. Even first, in today's day and age, I mean, the Rays, you're not getting anybody, so you can almost scrap who you're going to pick. I think that the team information is key, and I think you're right that we are going to get some good glimpses of what's going to go on in the coming month.
Well, I will say, if you do look at my charts, it's not perfect yet. I'm still refining it, but I do have a rating next to each team, and I have like an indicator. So if a team has a 3 next to it, I have that mostly confident, as that's how I see they're going to go. If it has a 2, I rate that as fluid, and if it has 1, I list that as a wonderful murky needs clarity. So I try and give people a little window to my thoughts on what that bullpen could look like as far as that rating system goes. But I agree with you. I need to come up with a better labeling system. So it's a number 5 rating would be a clear cut closer. And there's only a couple of teams that have that. So, I mean, I do try to address that, but definitely. And I did do that in one of my intro articles to The Athletic. It was almost like this team, it could go this way. And I listed who could be, and then what might happen, and things of that nature. But I'll keep trying to address all those things. But it's like being a fireman. Every time you think you got something figured out, another little spark pops up, and you got to put out another fire.
Yeah, September can be very, very tricky because if you look at the strength of schedule coming up for September, the Royals, the Pirates, and the Reds have pretty favorable schedules in September. So you may see pitchers like David Bednar pile up a lot of saves. You may see a pitcher, I don't even know, maybe Michael Givens pile up a bunch of saves, or what's his name, in Barlow in Kansas City. These guys may be piling up a lot of saves, but that only may be because of their strength of schedule. So don't see these inflated inflated save numbers. That's what I meant. Inflated save numbers, and it's just a smokescreen for next year. So you have to be very careful with how you watch this, because who you pick, it depends on for next year is going to depend on how they're doing, meaning how where they're not walking the world and just getting the occasional double play to get out of it. You have to see whether they're striking out people, to see where the manager is winning them. But Ariel, what you mentioned, it's team philosophy, not necessarily manager philosophy. Because look at Joe Madden. When Joe Madden was with the Rays, they had a separate closer. That was it. They had Fernando Rodney, and that was it. When he left, the philosophy of the team changed. And if you notice, wherever Joe Madden went, he only had one main closer. He never went closer by committee. It's not his philosophy. So you have to see what the philosophy of the team is, and to see the manager just on the side, just have an idea what the manager likes as well.
Agree. All right. Well, that wraps up our closer discussion. Really great stuff. And definitely check out Greg's spreadsheet, his Google spreadsheet online. Really great stuff. But let's move on to our waiver wire for this week. Here's where we talk about a couple of potential waiver wire pickups that might help you. Let's start with you, Greg. Who are some people that you might want to pick up this week?
In one league, I can gain points in stolen bases. So I'm probably, as much as it makes me maybe even gag a little, I'm probably going to be kicking the tires on Leody Taveras. I watched a couple of his. I was watching his at bats the other day. I had the Texas game on because I wanted to see the high leverage moments and those things. And that's a nice thing about MLB TV. I can watch all these games and get them rocking and rolling. I have the Pirates game on right now, Ruben. So there you go. But here's the thing. His last 8 games, he's been recalled. He's already got 2 home runs and 5 stolen bases. I know it's only a 167 BABIP. However, he has an 80.3 contact percentage since he's been recalled. And the key to me is 92.5 Z contact. Now, I don't think he's going to be a 300 hitter, but if he can hit anywhere even in the low 240, if he can hit in like 240 the rest of the season and get me a save or two, or excuse me, get me a stolen base or 2 a week, that could really help me in a couple of spots in NFBC standings. And I'm also watching his teammate Nick Solak. The Rangers have been doing some nice things ever since he's come back to the team. He's been hitting everything as well. His last 43 plate appearances, 2 home runs, 8 RBIs with a stolen base, and a 359 average. So and his OPS is almost at 1,000. So those are 2 sneaky guys for me that I'm going to be trying to get shares of this weekend if it's possible. How about you guys?
Ruve?
Well, since we're talking about closers, I'm going to mention a couple of closers who are very much available in a lot of leagues. Adam Adovino, who's mentioned already, he's only owned in 32% of CBS leagues. He has 11 saves this year, and he will be the closer. He has a closer history. There's no reason why he's already, like I said, 11 saves this year. He is already the closer. He has established himself, and I think he's just going to run with it because the Red Sox are in a chase. I think he's going to be the guy there. Another guy I want to mention, I mentioned him in the past, and that's Drew Steckenrider of the Mariners. He's one of the guys with 7 saves this year. Yes, they're closer by committee. Paul Sewald, he does come in occasionally. He's a high leverage guy, but Drew Steckenrider has had only for this year, his ERA is 1.82 with a 1.01 whip, 48 strikeouts in 54 innings, and he's very, very, very available in a lot of leagues. He's only owned in 15% of CBS leagues, so that's the guy you can pick up. Now, Greg, you mentioned you're watching the Pirates game. I'm going to mention Colin Moran. He had a 3-run homer tonight. He's only played 72 games this year, but he's batting .284 now with 8 homers and now with 37 RBIs, 1 stolen base. He's only owned in 21% of CBS leagues, and he's eligible at first and third. So if you need to fill in for a spot there, he's a guy to have. He's got a decent average, and he's playing basically every day.
Yeah, I like that Moran pick. I have him in 2 leagues of my own. I'm going to mention 2 closers. I mentioned before, Giovanni Gallegos. He's only 40% owned. He's got a couple saves in a row, 75 strikeouts in 66 innings. Again, it's the whip. In 2019, his whip was .81, 2020, .87, this year, .85 with an under 3 ERA. I mean, if you think about what the best pitchers in baseball do to your ratios, let's say you have a 1.1 whip. What do you think a closer who has, almost going to have almost 70 innings, so half the innings of a starter, they're going to have a tremendous impact on your whip, throwing .85. It's a ratios, it's a numbers game, right? All fantasy baseball is a numbers game. Those matter, and now the fact that he's getting saves, his roto value is through the roof, in my opinion. So if he's not on your roster, he should be right now. David Bednar, I mentioned him before, and Ruve mentioned his schedule. He's playing the next 4 teams: Detroit, Washington, Cincinnati, Miami. I think Bednar's been great all year. Under 1 whip, 2.35 ERA, 65 strikeouts in 53 innings. He's the closer, in my opinion. He's going to get the ops. I think he's going to have a couple of saves in the next couple of weeks. 2 Cubs to talk about. Ian Happ, he's back, 40% owned. Since August 16th, batting .362 with 5 homers and 12 RBIs, 787 slugging, a 211 WRC+. So he's quite a bit higher than the average player right now. 5 homers in 2 weeks, that's not somebody to neglect. He's batting third. You're going to get RBIs and runs if you're batting there. And how about the guy who's batting fourth every day, Frank Homer Schwindel? He seems to be hitting a homer every single day. In the month of August, 7 homers, batting .340 with 21 RBIs. and he's only 32% owned. He's going to be at home against Cincinnati and San Francisco, and then next week at Philly, at Milwaukee. Those are good ballparks. I picked him up in labor, and I'm so glad I did. I don't think that a 12-team league is too shallow for this guy. I think that he's worth it. And, looking forward to next year, the Cubs are testing out exactly what they have with this guy. So there you go. Pitcher preview, that's where we highlight either a good 2-star pitcher or a starter with a good 1 matchup next week. Who is the pitcher that you'd like to pick up? Let's start with you, Greg.
Well, it's funny. I picked up Reynaldo Lopez in tout because I thought he was just going to be in the bullpen, but I can maybe get a sneaky win or manage ratios with him with some strikeout upside. And now with the injuries affecting the White Sox, he's going to be moving into the rotation. So I believe he's starting this weekend against Kansas City, and he will get a spot start next week as well. Here's the thing. The last 30 days, he's 2-1. 3 of those were starts, 21 innings pitched, 22-5 K to BB, 1.71 ERA, 0.76 whip. Now, again, being a reliever does help that a little bit, but with a 3.34 SIERA, so only a little bit of regression. It backs up that the skills have been flashing out with him. He's increased his strike percentage. He's almost following the Gosman and others past that worked a little bit in the bullpen and then came back and refined their arsenal. He's picked up the swing and strike percentage with his slider, things of that nature. Also, Bailey Ober, I think, might get a 2 start next week. He was supposed to have one this week, but they're bringing Randy Dobnak back, so they're going to be pushing Ober into Monday. He gets Cleveland, and he could get Kansas City over the weekend next week. I think that would be a nice, sneaky 2 start if he does get them. He has a 2.45 ERA. His last 7 starts with a 1.06 whip, 36 strikeouts in those, and he's also increased the velocity on his slider as he's gotten comfortable in the majors. So those are 2 under-the-radar arms that I think people should be checking out next week. I think it's ridiculous. Ober's owned in like 21% Yahoo leagues.
Yeah, Ober, a good pick. He has not given up more than 3 earned runs in any of his last 8 starts, so that's pretty good on his spot. You mentioned Randy Dobnak, friend of the podcast. He was on earlier this year. He was on our show, so we wish him well. Ruvain, how about you?
Well, I'm going to mention a guy I mentioned a couple of weeks ago because he's only 46% owned, and he should be higher than that, and that's Eliezer Hernandez. That's 46% owned on CBS. He's got possible 2 starts against the Mets and at Atlanta. He's got 14 strikeouts in his last 15 innings. He is a good guy to get strikeouts from. If you need strikeouts down the stretch and you can not worry too much about your ERA and whip, then he's a guy to get. Now, if you want to try to get wins, this is my risky pick for the week. Usually I get a guy who's usually 5 or less % owned in CBS, and this week I have Paulo Espino of the Washington Nationals. He is at Atlanta and at Pittsburgh, who fired their hitting coach, so that must be good for the pitchers there. He's got 16 strikeouts in his last 13 innings, and ignore his ERA of 6 over the last 3 starts. His ERA for the season is still at 4.10, and he started a ton of games. He's only 5% owned in CBS, so if you need to try to get wins, yes, the Nationals aren't that great, but when you have a pitcher who's going against the Pirates, you got to take that.
Yeah, firing their hitting coach right at not even the season's over, just 5/6 of the way on a losing ball club. Not a good sign, I'll tell you that. The Padres fired their pitching coach just now. That was also a surprise. One of my picks is someone who pitched very well against them the other day, Luke Weaver, 10% owned. He's back from injury. He's going to be versus Texas next week. Last night against the Padres, 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, 1 earned run against a pretty good lineup in the Padres. So I like that pick, Luke Weaver, for next week. How about Carlos Fernandez? He's a little bit more owned, 50% owned. I love this guy for next year even. 25% strike rate, 40% ground ball rate, 97-mile-an-hour fastball, 12% swinging strike rate. Carlos Fernandez, he tackles Minnesota next week. I like that start. How about Antonio Senzatella? He's a future 2-star pitcher. He's only 15% owned. He's at home against San Francisco and then at Atlanta, at Washington. But here's why you should pick him up. Here's his innings pitched for the last couple of starts. 7, 6, 7, 6, 4 2/3, 6, 7, 5, 6, 6, 7. This guy pitches 6 or 7 innings pretty much. And he only gives up about 2 or 3 earned runs a game. The last couple, gets 5 strikeouts. I mean, this guy is a no-brainer to me in a 15-team league or deeper, and even in 10-team this week, because if you get him now, he's free, and he's on your roster for the future to start. So consider Antonio Cenzatella. Anybody want to talk about anybody else?